Hi, I'm John Liszewski, and I'm going to start you on getting started on building scale models. If you've done this before as a kid, there are all levels of building, starting with what we call out of the box. You just build it and you put it on a shelf. Second level would be to build and do some detailing, like paint tires black if it's a car or an airplane. Decals where they need to be, a little bit of super detailing will come along later if you want to go to that level, which would be probably level 3, which includes adding details like, for instance, you build a truck and you put the spark plug wires and the heater hoses. This is of course with those details. This is considered out of the box, which is just an airplane painted and decals applied, so there's nothing special with this except that it was a quick, easy build. This has a certain level of detailing added. This is a very basic kit from the 1960s, so I updated it with a little bit better detailing with the winch and the little extra crane. There's a part up here you raise up to for like fixing trucks or whatever. And then the next level is super detail, when you add all the aftermarket items like custom figures, which are model kits in their own right. There's aftermarket parts that you can add, like the stowage boxes and bags. And this is also has an extensive use of washes, which bring out the lower details, and then also some of the dirt on the tires is also what they call a wash. You can even use, real dusty dirt if you want to go to that level, but when you remember that you're working with scale, dirt in this scale is finer than the finest sand, so it's not really distinguishable as such. And then of course you can do something like a winter scene. The snow is made with something called celluclay, and then which is basically ground up newspaper. And while it's still wet, you make impressions where your vehicles are going to be, and then you go back and detail as it goes. So that's most of all this stuff is a work in progress. You almost never finish. Just like you don't finish when you're doing painting. You have to find the walkaway point. Okay, so first step, you buy your kit, decide what you're going to build. And in this case, I already built one of these because I was looking for this car and I was going to use it as a visualization point to find one in charcoal, which I bought and painted and built from that kit. Unfortunately, I couldn't find one that color, so I found one in a kind of a misty gold color. So since I did that, the next step is to build one like that. So the first thing you do is you open the box, take all your parts out of the plastic, take all of this to the kitchen sink and wash it down real good with Dawn dish soap, because that'll cut through all of the what they call mold release, or a silicone-based lubricant to keep the parts from sticking when they mold these, because these are molded at extremely high temperatures and pumped in from one side and exhausting on the other. So you'll see little pins here, and this whole thing is called a sprue. And so you get that washed off and let it dry real good, and then you can get started. So what I've done here in this case, which is something to consider, there's a lot of parts that are small and will take off down the road somewhere if you try to handle them with tweezers ahead of time. So I started to pre-assemble the engine from all the spaces you see here. So this engine's partially assembled on the sprue because this is something easy to hold on to, and you can clamp it in a vise like this, or make something of your own to hold on to it while you're going through the process. So it works that way. And the basic tools you probably should have, watch it back there, is all this stuff can be bought at the hobby store, but if you're on a tight budget, a dollar store works as well. You need a set of snippers to break these pieces off. So you get in there and get real tight with the square side and snip where you need to be. Otherwise, going like this with your fingers, you'll break it off. And it also leaves a great big chunk of plastic that has to be filed down to make the parts fit. I used 2 different types of tweezers. You just have to learn to not over grip things, so that if you squeeze too tight they go flying, and you can't find it until the vacuum cleaner comes in and finds it for you. You'll need a razor knife or an X-Acto knife which is used a lot of times for what they call mold seam. Now you can't see it on the figure here, but there'll be a seam running down the edge where the two parts of the mold come together, and you kind of want to scrape that off so that it looks more flush. If you decide to go into competition, that would be something of an issue. I don't see anything here that I can describe that with, but a pair of scissors, rubber bands, something to hold parts together, like well, I guess you call them roach clips now, and clothespins for clamping pieces together, because I prefer, and most people do prefer now, is liquid glue, because you're not really gluing it together. You're actually, this will soften both sides of the parts you're putting together, and it actually welds it together. So when you want to put pressure in there to hold that. I also think you should probably get some at the dollar store as well. Super glue gel and super glue liquid. Whatever you touch with that, if it gets on your fingers, like, don't get it on your fingers and do this, or you'll be going to work with your finger in your eye. I got these at the flea market, and these are hemostats for pinching off veins, but they're very good for clamping small parts when you're trying to paint or hold on to something while you're painting. So for instance, if I was going to finish off this figure, I would use the hemostats like that. I could hold it there and then go back in and touch in details as needed. So, and a little bit of tape, Scotch tape or that kind of tape. I also keep myself a little cup with parts that I don't want painted on the sprue ahead of time. And what I did here was things that I know that are going to be black, because the kit started out in this gray color. Things that I know that are going to be interior color, which my car is all black inside. So I pre-painted some of the parts ahead of time so that I don't have to go back and try to paint it later. And what I use, I prefer, but it's not, you know, everything is up to you. I like to use Krylon or Rust-Oleum as for parts like the underside and interiors, because it eats into the plastic a little bit and gives you more of a fabricy texture versus my favorite paint, which is Model Masters. And I don't have a can. Here we go, Model Master. This is going to be probably disappear pretty soon. It's an enamel-based paint, but it's some of the best paint I've ever used. I mean, it goes on like glass when it dries nice. It's a little bit soft, but the finish is always really good. Good. So I'm going to do a test shot to see how this looks. So far, I can't tell. There's color. All right. So this is actual touch-up paint. And you can't use this unless you primer first. So I want to do the hood first, because I know it's not going to run, which is a real problem with using this paint. It looks good so far. That one's going to be questionable. Let me just prop this up here so it doesn't change. Next, though, I didn't prime that side. Daggone it. Stuff you can't see when the lights are bad. Get some air on it. Number 2. All right, going for the car body now. Hopefully this all works well. Do the bottom first, because that's the parts you don't usually see. Do a light first coat. The hardest thing is to see that you've hit everything. I'm going to move it down here so I can get the top. With this paint, you can't get too close because it's not designed to be for models. It's designed to touch up your real car. So I think I'm pretty well coated here. So I think you can stop it there. Understand these kits are probably 15 or 20 years old already, so the paint is starting to go a little bit, but they're both, I use Model Masters on all of these here. Okay, so then the next step is you have to lay out things that you know are going to go together in certain steps, and that is going with these really crappy new instructions that come with the kits now. Years ago, you would get, well, this has a little bit of a history on the car, and it also gives you color choices and such. using numbers that will follow along in the instruction sheet as to where things should be or colored however, you know, to match whatever it is you're working on. Interiors, you paint whatever color you think you should. If you're trying to match someone else's car or just something you like to do. But the steps are very important in these kits, especially putting the uppers and lowers together, especially with a newer car like this where there's so much plastic involved. Like for instance, this is a 1969 Dodge Coronet, so most of the stuff is molded on and pops on afterwards. But in a case like this, you're going to have to glue pre-painted parts together, and that becomes very difficult with liquid glue. So you have to you know, consider other means. But the instructions are pretty straightforward that way, except that they're just overly simplified. So what they don't tell you is okay, assemble the engine halves together. That's the manifold. These are the cylinder heads. That's the valve cover with the what do you call them? Coil packs. This is the protective cover over the intake manifold. There's the exhaust manifold, the front of the engine, and the belt system. This will be completely invisible, so if you left it off, nobody would know. But you know, some people like to display things as you know, in order of assembly or under construction, so to speak. The interior is pretty straightforward. You don't have to paint both sides of the inside because this won't be seen once it's assembled onto the. Well, let's see how this is going to go here. Yeah, it's all backwards. So this will go in here like this. So all this will be assembled in a way where you're not going to see it from the outside because these panels will fit up inside the body like this once everything is completely assembled. And any detailing you want to do it on here now before you put it together, because you don't want to have to reach around to make those little details. So in a case like this, the dashboard is two halves. So the instrument panel is missing. It's another piece. I want to paint that gloss black, and then the center of the instruments on this particular car are silver. So I was going to go and paint that while it's still on the sprue, which happens to be in this pile here. So that's the instrument cluster there. So it glues in from behind as well as the brake pedal and the center console. So at some point I'm going to spray this whole thing black as well. But I wanted to let you see how it is before that happens. And so there's some in front end. These parts go in the engine compartment up here. You can see those two are back there where the shock tower is. There's the intake manifold, the overflow for the radiator and the filling tank, and then over here is a little spout for the windshield washer, and then this is another fuse box. So all that is in here on this pile of parts, including the shroud for the fan and the radiator, and this is the protective cover here without the chrome piece on it. So all this stuff is here. Will be glued to that part of the car, which is this part of the chassis. So as you see, I painted the bottom black. I usually do black or a dark gray primer, but this is before all the suspension parts get added, which are in the other box over there, and this is stuff that you won't see once it's assembled, so you don't really have to paint the whole thing. And the parts that would go on there are here. So I painted the stuff black that needed to be. So there's the drive shaft and drivetrain. This is the front and rear suspension parts, the what do you call it? Stabilizer bar and the front axle, tie rod, windshield wipers, and I think somewhere in here is, oh, there's the mirrors. These are the front and rear disc brakes. These are stabilizer bars and lower suspension parts for the, there's front struts and the lower suspension parts for the front or rear. I'm not sure. I have to look at the instructions. So anyway, so they're pre-painted. These will all be eventually added in here as such, and the finished version would be like this, and this is gray, and these parts are chrome in the kit. I decided to make them hit them with a what do you call it, like a more of a metallic color, because you know really none of that would be chrome, and it wouldn't stay chrome under the car anyway, and nobody's going to climb under and look because it's such a low profile car. You have to put a jack in there. And as you see in here, I also painted the calipers red. That's a popular thing to do with blacked out rims in some of these lowrider cars. I personally don't like the size of these tires. I think they're a little bit small, but that's my preference. This particular kit, the grill was supposed to be chrome like this, but I never liked that grill, so my car had the what do you call it, the, I guess, crisscross thing on there. But this I recessed a little bit with metal that I got at a railroad supply shop, which looks like this. So it's at brass screening. So I traced out the size and cut it in and made it fit, and then sprayed it over afterwards. There's another version in a little bit heavier duty. I'm not sure which one I'm going to use yet. It depends on how much flexibility there is in the process. So anyway, you get to this point, get everything painted the way you want to, and then you, as the instructions tell you, you start following those steps to get from point A to point B. So pretty straightforward here. The assembly of the interior parts is not a whole lot to not a whole lot to it. It's just, you know, seats and such. But one thing you can do before you put all this together is something called dry brushing. And what that does is it will bring out the highlights of the seats. Now these are straight black, so there's not a whole lot of anything you can do to make this look better. But there is a method called washing. Say if I did a seat with white interior like I did in here, I don't know if you can see it or not, but do you see the black lines I painted in on the seats?
No, I can't.
Okay, it's kind of hard because it's probably a glare. But anyway, that you do that with a wash, which is a very thinned out bit of paint. I like this color smoke. I got this at Hobby Lobby, but you can also get it at, in Easton at the hobby store there. And I put a couple of drops in a, you know, you get all these medicine containers every time you buy a bottle of something. So I use these, put a couple of drops in, and then add a couple of drops of water until it's almost transparent. And then you get a very thin brush, not too long, and you dip it in, and you just kind of, let me get the blade better here. So, and you just kind of just follow these little lines around with the brush. And even if it overflows a little bit, you can just go back like that and smear it out of the way. So that gives you a three-dimensional look. But the actual dry brushing, I'll find a little bit of dark gray here, and I'll show you how that works. Let's see here, what's that? Dark iron, too dark. What did I do with it? I had it out front right away, and now I can't find it because I want it. All right, I'll use a lighter gray. If anything that doesn't work before you assemble, you can always go back and fix. Okay, so this is really light, so it's probably not going to be exactly what I'm looking for, but to give you an idea. So I just dip it in, get a little color, smear it around a little bit, and I'll start back here and I'll show you. And then you just lightly drag it across the surface. That's not working. This paint's too old, I think. Yeah, it's not. Let's try it again. So, and you just kind of drag it across, and it picks up the edges. It's a little bit extreme, but I can go back and fix that after a while. But that gives you it pulls up the highlights, and then when you're done, here I can do it on this one too, I guess. And you can do the same thing here too. This will, so it pulls out the edges a little bit. I gotta find better paint. That's the problem. You know, you buy stuff, you think you have what you need, and then you put it away and you buy something else, and you realize that the other stuff has been sitting too long, and you try to do something, you cuss it and call it names. Let's see, what's this one? Dark yellow, that might work. Now this is acrylic based paint. I use both. I like the enamels from the spray cans for the basic colors, and then acrylics for other details, mostly because it doesn't smell and make a big mess when you change brushes. Seems to do them hard right now. Okay, so you get it to it's almost completely dry, and that's why this table looks so nice like that. And get under the light here, and then you go back and you drag this across, and it picks up the edges like that, and that brings out the detail and gets you a very three-dimensional look on the finished product there. So, and some people like to use a really big fat brush and just drag it over everything. They do the same thing with the washes. That's just something you have to try on your own. But the nice thing is it just takes a very flat, boring surface and makes it more three-dimensional. And then Is that okay?
Yep, yep,
And then you can go with a darker wash to deeper as well. And this works on everything, including figures. So in this case, this guy's a little bit washed out, but you can do the same thing. I can take the same, use the same method to bring out the highlights on the figure also, and that brings out the folds in the clothing and makes it more three-dimensional. So it's very subtle, but you want to be subtle because, you know, if you're outside and you in the bright sunlight, your pants aren't going to have that much of a change in color from what you're looking at to where you're going. So now, if you're going to do glass parts, one of the things, again, I like the liquid glue, but there is tube glue that you can use. The problem is people think it's glue is actually glue, but it's really, they call it cement or a welding, and it has to. So if you use liquid tube cement, what you end up doing is putting a layer of glue between two pieces of plastic, and after a while that's going to let go. The other problem is when you're working with clear parts like on an airplane canopy, if you use regular glue, that will start to smoke up where the glue has touched the edges, and if you want to keep it clear, that and super glue are the two worst things you can use, because super glue dries through evaporation, and that process creates heat, and the heat gets into the plastic and smokes up the canopy. So you can have a beautiful model, and then you have that one really gray, nasty spot on there that doesn't do much good. But anyway, they make a special glue, which is, it's a white glue, and it's designed specifically for canopies and glass parts, or as I say, clear plastic parts for windshields and such. It's not doing anything except making contact, so it's more like a contact cement, but it doesn't attack the plastic at all, so it won't give you any problems with drying clear. But even if you did make that, have that problem with your clear parts, something else you can do, and I'll dig into my box of goodies here. One of my favorite products to have, and this will last you 100 years, but it's Future Floor Wax, or whatever they call it now, and it's just 100% clear acrylic. And you can, several things you can do with this. You can pre-coat your canopy or your glass parts with this. It'll smooth out and dry nicely. You just literally just dip it and take it back out. Or if you want to go with an airbrush, which I think is a great thing to use, but I just don't like the cleanup or the mess that comes with that. And this is also something I use on like for tank models. The door's going to slam. Hold on. You put a little spot of this over where the decals are going to go, so you don't have to clear coat the entire tank model and then go back and flat coat it afterwards. It's because you just added 2 more layers of thickness to the overall finish, and that makes it a little more toy looking versus realistic. So this is extremely thin, but it works really well for that purpose. And I also use this for clear coating paintings afterwards too, because it doesn't attack anything. And this especially good with acrylics because it's acrylic based anyway. Now, if it gets wet, it'll turn white until it re-dries, but it'll re-dry clear. So it's kind of cool stuff to have. Okay, so tires. This may go faster than I thought. There's several things you can do with tires on car models, especially because they come usually in the form of some kind of vinyl. I guess that's the wind. That wind picked up pretty good here. Again, got to have your X-Acto knife. So your tire comes as an already pre-grooved, even with lettering on the side. That's another place dry brushing works, by the way. You dry brush that to pick up the letters on the tires. A couple things you can do. One of them is to make it more realistic, instead of a big piece of rubber, is to sand the edge of the tires, and that gives you the scuffed look like it's been on the road. And then if you got something that's more of an off-road kind of a situation, then you can do what they call it, again, a wash. Oops, that figure's not, none of them are solid, but that using a wash of and I'll get that in a second, but that gives you a muddy tire look. And again, you have to experiment. I and anybody can tell you that numerous ways to do it, but washes are washes. Let me see what I've got with this one. I think this is another. I didn't do a whole lot with those tires because they're so small you can't see them anyway. But this is another one where this was my son's car, so I decorated it up like he had his, and and you can see the difference in the interior with the gray and the washes to bring out the seat cushion details. And this was painted with Rust-Oleum because his car, the cars from the 90s, the paint didn't stick very well. So we ended up spraying the whole car with a can of Rust-Oleum and a matte black surface. So the imperfections in that kind of worked because that's how his car looked. It was a great little car. We finally sold it with 300,000+ miles, and it's still on the road. So it's a tough little Honda. Okay, so then after you get all your assemblies together, and again, the instructions are very important. They do them for a reason. And you can see how all the suspension parts they just draw arrows down now, so it really doesn't tell you what it is. But there's your exhaust system, I forget what they call those in the back. The catalytic converters are up here, the crossover member, and these are some kind of tone the sound down so it's not too loud at the other end. All the suspension parts are in here showing, and this front plate that protects the bottom of the motor. The grille and the headlight assembly, the chrome trim pieces that fit on the front of the grille. So when you get to that point, now it's time to, and this is the point where you should have already painted the body too, by the way. So the hood, the front grille, and the rear section should be painted the color you want it and dry for probably a couple days, because the paints are going to take a while to tack on, to be to where you can handle them without your finger oils wrecking the finish. And depending on whether you're building this as somebody's been building a lot and might want to take it to a contest, you don't want to have fingerprints and greasy soft spots on your car, because the what we call rivet counters, and you have to have rivet counters to keep yourself grounded, because you might think you've done a really good job, and then they'll point something out and you'll get mad at them like, but in fact they're trying to help you, because there are things that you should just for the sake of making a realistic rendition of the car or truck or airplane or whatever you're trying to build. There's a certain level that you want to try to hold on to and get better every time you do something. So anyway, in this case, here's where all the body and everything is being assembled. I don't like putting the wheels on as early as they're shown, because something might happen where you want to make some changes, and you want to have those to the point when you're ready to glue them on, set the car down so it's sitting on all four wheels, and the weight of the plastic will make sure all the wheels are on the ground. With the newer models where there's no metal axles anymore, the slightest misalignment of parts could cause you have a car sitting at the table and one wheel is sticking way up and it's rattling around. It's not a lot of fun. So it says here to attach the interior to the chassis, put all the extra parts in on here, and the motor all in the steps that they have them. And of course the number that you see are the numbers of the parts that are on the tree or the sprue. So, and this, so you can see little numbers in these little blocks here. That's corresponds with the numbers on the drawing, so you know where that is. And this any kind of manual has the same thing. Well, for what I do for a living too, we have the same thing. We tell the customer, well, what's the part number? And they say, well, I don't know. I said, well, open the manual. Well, I don't have one. I said, so you're going to open this box and build something without instructions. Good luck. So anyway, so this is the point where you get everything assembled and put the wheels on, and you're done. Again, you want to let it sit for a while before you handle it, because paint takes a while to dry, especially the enamels. And the water-based spray cans are the same way, or airbrushing, whatever it is. Airbrushing, the paint's way thinner than what's coming out of what we call a rattle can or a spray can. So you have even less handling that you should do. So if you aren't going to put it in a display case, try to handle it with cloth gloves, or pick it up with a tissue or something, so you don't get your finger oils on. Now, that's the most basic thing you can do. In this case, I'm going to do more custom work on the car to match the actual car that I have. So the black interior I've already taken care of. The dashboard has a chrome strip across here that I want to paint in. The gauge cluster has an aluminum bezel, they call it. The gauge face, which I think we pointed out before, which is here, will have 3 silver gauges with a black background. The lower half has actually no detail at all, but some of the cars from this brand have two-tone interiors, white and black, black and white, tans, blues, match, and leather. And all those differences are things that you can customize with the kit. If you're building something that you know, like it's your wish list, or you're building something for someone else that is their car, you know, and things that don't need to be chrome, like pretty much all this doesn't need to be chrome. I would probably paint that over like I did here with the subduing it to more of a natural metal. But it's also pretty clean, and I probably should have done some dry brushing under here to pick out those details, but you know, you're really not supposed to be you know, oh, that's really nice. One thing you never do if you go to a model contest is pick up someone else's model. If it was Sharia law, you'd lose a hand, but we don't do that here. But you know, you can have it up to 40 hours of work on a model kit, and then somebody picks it up, hey, does this move? And they snap it off, and you sit there and you try to be calm and think of ways that you know, should I let the air out of his tires? Or, you know? So you know, it's steps and levels, but it's still an art form and a different way of actual painting and such. So anyway, so the next step is I want the wheels to be black. Of course, they come chrome in the kit, and they're not the same wheels that I have on my car. So I went online and I found wheels that match what are on my car with taller tires. Of course, they're not here. They were supposed to ship last week and they didn't make it. So, but I can still paint these to turn out like this, and I would accept that if I couldn't find anything else to work, you know, the way I wanted to. But same thing, and also I guess you didn't notice, but there's your disc brakes are also usually polished steel because the brake pads are rubbing on them all the time. So I left that part of the sprue unpainted, so I want to paint that silver and then put the calipers in red, because all the, you know, the fancy aftermarket brakes are in red. As an example, this is a motor that I assembled off of the sprue, and I pre-painted some of the parts, but this is an older model, and then this part would go on top, and then there'd be two carburetors and a big air cleaner. So but that's the thing that I liked about older model kits, is they would tell you what everything is. Now it's just a picture with a number and an arrow, so you don't learn anything about the car or the truck or anything you're building. Some of the imported kits, like this monster over here, that I've been sitting on for 20 years. When this first came out, it was about $75. I think it's $140 now. So I actually got it as a gift, fortunately. But this one comes with a book. So, and the reason it comes in a book is because there are so many steps. Well, look at this. See, this is how model kits used to come. Here's a whole history in several languages of this particular vehicle, which is a tank transport vehicle from World War II, or the what do you call it? Excuse me, I'm sorry. They call it the Dragon Wagon. So the built-up version is there. That's an older build from an older kit. There's a lot of dimensional issues with that that I don't care about, but a lot of people do. But as you see with this one, you know, the model, the instructions, they tell you all the tools you need. And I think there's a page with the colors before that. No, not there. But anyway, there's the history and some photos. And then this is obviously a lot more detailed than the car model is, so you can see that there's major pre-steps you have to do prior to assembly. Really, it's up to you to decide whether you want to paint stuff ahead of time or after. If you paint it ahead of time, you have to scrape away paint where two parts are going to come together, otherwise the glue's not going to hold. And but this is just step after step after step of extremely difficult, detailed parts of this tank. I mean, this is beyond. I mean, there's the only thing that they don't have is you're not putting actual screws in to hold it together. But the detail is phenomenal, and this particular brand is like #1 in the world. Everybody, if they're going to buy something, that if you see that name on there, you're going to get a good kit regardless. So anyway, it comes with a figure set which you have to assemble and paint, and they give you the little black things with the XF15. That's their code for the paint that they manufacture as well, and that's those little tan bottles here. So this one is dark yellow, so that's XF60, and that's probably a German armor color. but it's also a good color for the khaki jackets that they would use, and they have what's called the tanker jacket, which I can show you an example of that too. And as you can see, there's nothing small or easy about this kit, and there's so many pre-assembly steps that are necessary to get that. And on top of that, I don't know if this one has it or not, but there's also super detailing sets of it, etched brass parts. I don't know if this kit has it or not. Oh, here we go. So some of the details are etched pieces. So those are grill covers. And I'll show you another example of etched parts. Excuse me. So here's a super detail kit for a Sherman tank. And there, all these little straps are, you bend them up to fold around the tools, which would be, on this particular case, they give you all the straps to hold all these little pieces on, which I have no patience for that anymore. But there's also the headlight guards, which I think I did use on here. No, they're plastic there. But these little pieces here, you can replace those with etched brass. And there's also, now this is for a different kind of a tank that I don't have an example of right here, but there's a tank with a wider trail on the outside, and there's all these little pieces you have to fold 90 degrees and glue them on as supports for the actual fender. So that's a little bit crazy too. So, so anyway, so the next same thing here is you get certain sub-assemblies set up and get your rattle can out or whatever and paint it ahead of time, because when you get to the point where you start putting things together, you won't be able to get in to a lot of places once they're assembled. Now in this case, this was such a horrible kit. There's very little here that's actually any good. It's all like just popped together, and I actually took two other model kits, sacrificed two other model kits to get the proper wheels and such on this one. So this is only good from the top. This thing, you can do a diorama like that and have it tipped over on the side, and all the undersides are properly detailed for the kind of look you're trying to get as a well, diorama is essentially a little scene that you set up to make it look like something realistic going on. So I've got two over there, and I got one in the box over here loading up the Sherman. And here's a Normandy invasion with the 82nd Airborne, or one of the airborne groups, coming in and going through a bombed out town like Carrollton, or not Carrollton, Saint-Mary-Église, or one of those things. So, and the fact that even that I would know some of that stuff is because you got to do research. So when you get out you go to the library, you get yourself some books, and that includes stuff about the cars as well. But here's all the colors of the uniforms, all different versions of things that you could use for detailing your kit. So this particular trench coat comes in several different colors. Every manufacturer is given a color code, but none of them ever match. So with American uniforms, you can have such a wide range of color that you can play a little bit with that. That book's too hard to get out, but anyway, there's a whole library of reference in hobby stores and online for colors and details. So now this particular kit, this is built from parts left over from other model kits that I did. So there's not a good fit underneath here, as you can see. So it's three different manufacturers of kits put together to make this particular model. The tracks are wrong, but only certain people would know that, so I won't point it out. And so then you get to the point where you want to put decals on, if you have the need to do that. In the case of like tank models, the Germans had their insignia, Americans had theirs, British had theirs. Again, water slide decals they're either really good or really bad. Some brands are really thick. They're so thick, in fact, that if it was real life, they'd be like a half-inch thick of paint on something. A better decal will be really thin, but also so extremely delicate that even trying to slide it off the paper, it'll come apart. If you have a kit that's older, like this is 25 years old, so I don't know if I would trust the decals unless they're still sealed in plastic, because they, number one, they yellow over time. See, this paper was white when it started, so you couldn't even see those stars. But this, I know this sheet is no good anymore, so I don't use it for anything. And then this is a slightly newer one, and you can see the stars on the blue background. But see, with this one being, I know it's from this particular company. This is really good quality decal, whereas this other sheet is from another brand. I'm sorry. The other thing to look at also with your decals, and I don't know if you can see the glare or not, if there's any clear beyond the color of the decal. So that white circle shouldn't have any clear around it, because that will be hard to cover when the model's finished, because it'll frost up when you put it down on the tank. So whenever possible, cut it as close as you possibly can to the color, and then when you're finished, it'll have a nice edge on it. See this one, I just put the decals on recently, so it's not really, you don't really have silvering per se, which is what they call that when the clear parts show. And it's difficult not to have silvering on this type of decal, because the dark parts around the star are clear, because you couldn't make that decal go on with two separate pieces. So what I haven't done with this yet, because you have to mask everything off that would get overspray on, I haven't sprayed it with clear flat to take the shine off of the decal. But other things you can do, because during especially if you're working on a wartime vehicle, the decals or the markings would never be pure white. So in this case, this is just an example of how it will come out of the factory. And I even subdued that a little bit, and it's still way too bright. So this is bad news when you're the person in the tank, because it's a target for the other gunner. So a lot of times at the end of the war, they would just paint them out. So the shape of the star is still there, but it's painted out with whatever paint they had laying around. So close up you can tell, and you know, tanks are tanks. They're every country had their own tank. Everyone was a little bit different. So an educated soldier knows what to shoot at or what to run from. But usually the German tanks were much bigger than ours, so it wasn't really an issue. You just ran. It's safer. Okay, so decals are the other thing. Okay, so then in this particular case, this car has almost no chrome, but there is edging around the windows where the glass is held in. So in this case, it will be black here, and it will be black around this edge, and then there's a black center post, which you have to do separately and afterwards. So there's two ways of doing that. One of them is just take your chances with a regular brush, but the other way would be using, excuse me, I'm gonna run all over the place here. The other way would be using a paint pen. And what did I do with the other one here? Oh, here it is. Okay. So this is my chrome. This one I use for chrome, and this is I get this at Michael's or Hobby Lobby. And this one I got at Walmart, but they're this one I think is water based, and this one is enamel based. But the nice thing about it is you're not trying to control a pencil, a paintbrush. You can use the side of this and just drag it this way. Oh, it's dried up. How about that? Here we go again. Oh, there we go. Anyway, you can just hold that on the edge and hit the surface without over painting onto this. Let me find something to use that's better than that. I'm gonna do this. Okay, so a paintbrush, if you used a paintbrush, all this stuff like this would fill in with paint. But if you used a paint pen, you can see how, sort of like dry brushing, I'm catching the surface, and you're getting the detail of the brake lines and the fuel lines as a separate part, without getting anything over on the say the surface around the glass, and then when you look at it, say, oh, it looks pretty good. So with this one, this particular car, if I was doing my own, as I would be, I would take this pen across this edge right here because there's a chrome. That's the only chrome on the car is that strip and the chrome on the grill. So I haven't done that, but I'm not going to do that now because you have to do it after the car is painted. And see, I've got the glass in here now, so I can't even do it on this one. But I would take the pen to see how I'm holding it with one hand and the rest of my fingers back here for balance. And you just touch and you just pull it nice and easily, and that'll. So you never try to freehand. Always brace your hand. So I'm bracing this and I'm bracing this with my fingers, and then you just pull across like that, and then it gives you control over the sweep across there, and then you don't have any issues with overflow. And the other nice thing about it is that there's details on this cover, like writing or something. I can also pull that out with a dry pen like this. So see, it says Dodge, is it Dodge Fire Dome or Dodge Red Ram or something on there. I don't have my glasses on, but that's how dry brushing works. But also the nice thing about the paint pens is you can pull that off without destroying something. And then you got to find the lid to put it back on so it doesn't dry up. It's here somewhere. I put it down. I got everything scattered, and that's how I work, scattered. What did I do with that? Anyway, I'll find it when I don't need it. So now, in the case of car models, sometimes you can get a really good finish just right out with the can by itself. If you put decals on a car model like this, you want to protect the decals, so you would have to mask off all the clear parts and all other things you don't want to get overspray on, and then clear coat it with, again, I love this stuff. They make a really good gloss paint, gloss clear, Model Masters, and I did it on this one. I didn't do it on this one. That's probably why it's not as nice as it could be. But that protects the chrome, because chrome paint doesn't stick real well, and it'll rub off on your fingers if you handle it too much. What did I do with that lid? And then it also, because the clear is a lacquer, if this paint is a little bit soft, that lacquer will protect it better, so you can handle it more. But usually what happens is car models get grabbed here, truck models the same way, tanks like this, and those are the spots that will get soft from finger oil. So whenever you have the opportunity, take a tissue to pick it up. And it's not a good example because I clean the brush with it, but that way when you're not going to put any finger oil on it when you handle it. If you know, unless you don't care. Brushes, I just go, I get them at Walmart, I get them wherever I see them. Brushes are good quality pretty much everywhere. Depending on how much modeling you plan on doing and how your skill levels get, you can start buying better brushes. The better the brush, the better it is, easier to handle, and they have a life, because every time you put paint on it, it gets pulled up into the stem, and eventually it starts hardening up towards the tip until you have nothing left but that, and that's when you throw it away and get another brush. So start with, if you're just getting started, start with cheap brushes and work your way into something more more better. Okay, I gotta find that lid. So anyway, so the variety of models is, endless. If you can think of it, it's probably out there. If you're not sure what you want to build, go on to any online store, like say Mega Hobbies or as an example, I say go to Mega Hobbies only because they list everything that's out there, and you can spend hours looking. But I like to support the hobby stores, because if they're not open, this kind of thing goes away, and they have contests once in a while, and it allows you to see how you do against other people's work, just like art shows. You want to see how you stand in the world of model building or painting or whatever. So if you support them, they'll be open. Most of the staff is very helpful with problems you might have. A lot of them have clubs, which is really good to get into, because you have other people help you with what you're working on, and you learn something. You learn history. You learn mechanics. If you want to get crazy, you buy a ship model with sails. You spend 2 or 3 years of your life putting every little rope that goes on to hold the mast up, or real cloth sails or other cloth sails. You find things that work for you to make something you would never expect. Like for instance, the tarp on the back of this tank over here is just a piece of tin foil. So I put something underneath it, took the foil and formed it down over what I was trying to cover, and I took it off and painted it, and then did a wash on it to look like a dirty piece of white sheet or whatever, to, you know, sort of camouflage the parts and protect them from, because it might be like a cardboard box with food in it or something, so they put the tarp over to protect it from the snow. And I mean, sky's the limit. You just get out there and experiment with things. Okay, for example, I don't know if I used it here or not. No, I didn't do it on that one, but headlights on cars and trucks and vehicles, they come with clear lenses usually, but they don't always look realistic. So if you get ambitious, you can get a drill bit and drill that out. And I went to Walmart and found some adhesive backs, like gems. I don't have them handy. But anyway, they're prism cut little gems, like little diamonds. And I took them out and stuck them in the headlight socket after I drilled it, and then put a couple of drops of this clear windshield stuff over top. And now you've got a realistic looking lens. But there are also, in aftermarket parts, actual lens designed for each one of these model kits. So you can find anything you want for pretty much anything if you're willing to spend the time looking and spend the money to get it there. So you can work on a budget, or you can spend hundreds of dollars on a kit that's already $100. Now something like this, I'm almost sure that the headlight lenses, by looking at it, are probably an aftermarket lens that is designed specifically to make it look really good. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're in here somewhere amongst all these layers of parts. So I probably don't need to buy anything for this kit to make it look 100%. Something else to notice too is look at the artwork on that box. That's some beautiful work there. And now there's of course a difference between art and illustration. This is an illustration to sell this model kit, but if you look at that, you say, wow, I want to build that, and then you buy it and you open the box and you're like, holy crap, I had to build that. So start small, work your way up to something like this. So there's usually a skill level marked on the box somewhere, and I don't see it there, but made in Japan. Okay, well in this case it doesn't, but if you look online, they usually have skill levels on there. So this kit here, I would say, oh, here we go. So that says skill level 2, so age 10 plus. And so the skill level 1 would be a snap together kit, where pretty much everything is assembled and you just take little pieces, snap them together, and you're finished. You don't paint it or anything, so it'll look like a big blob of gray plastic from one end to the other with black tires and chrome wheels.